So, Sonya,
Hello.
hey. Right, so do I say g'day or do I say howdy?
Well, you could say both. You'd be like, "G'day, mate," and, "Howdy, how's your day?"
Hey. So to give it context, you are native Aussie. Am I allowed to say that, being not
You
Australian?
can.
So you're native Australian, but you are now in America.
Yeah, I'm a Texan Aussie.
It's mad. How long have you been in America now?
Since 2021, I was sort of traveling back and forth for work for some time, and then really started kinda getting traction in the US, at that time, and, met with the governor's office in Texas and, was asked to stay and drafted a couple of bills, in relation to child protection um, and then kind of along the way met my now husband.
Hey.
There we go. So I just, was, uh was basically snatched up by a Texan man, and, here I am. Though now
Cowboy?
back and forth. No, he's not a cowboy,
I'm
but
joking. I'm joking.
he's
Um,
he's just a good round old great guy, and um, it just kind of kept me here, and so now we established the foundation in America as a 501(c)(3). So
Amazing. So just to anyone that may find this conversation and listening, this is all very sort of like, what the hell are you going on about? So let's fill the blanks. So you say foundation. So should we rewind about
yeah.
setting up why have you set up a foundation? What is the foundation?
So my daughter Carly was groomed online by an online predator and his son. Um, they were speaking to her for over 18 months, portraying as a young boy. And she developed a friendship with who she thought was a teenage boy, which then led into a more, I guess, a young girl, being drawn into the idea of this loving relationship with an exciting young man. And, she thought he was just a dream. What she didn't realize is she was actually talking to a man that was over 50 years old who was operating over 200 fake profiles online to groom children. And he attempted to meet two girls in the United States, one in Singapore, and then convinced my daughter to meet with him alone in February or the end of January 2007. And there he brutally murdered her. And, there's not really any easy way to talk about that. But that's kind of the reality of the situation. His son was involved, and he was obviously went to trial. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, and his son was unfortunately acquitted and went on to offend against a number of girls in the state of Victoria and in Australia, and only received a 35-month sentence for those assaults against young girls. But for me, I couldn't focus on them. I had to really focus on what I could do to make sure that what happened to my daughter didn't happen to another innocent child in the future. And I think, in that groundless grief, in that shock of this crime, um, the gift in the sorrow was an amazing sense of clarity and purpose, and real connection. And I kind of just knew right at the beginning, even before the trial was over, that, I had to do something because here we were just, getting smartphones, Facebook had just taken off, beginning to take off. And I kind of knew, I go, oh God, there's going to be goodness knows how many criminals falsifying their identity and age to minors online, trying to harm them. And, I just felt a sense of real duty to do something. And I think when you go through something like that and, you witness the brutality of seeing your own child go through such a horrendous, thing, you genuinely don't want to see another mother or family or father or anyone have to go through that. And you certainly don't want to see a child go through something so horrific. And so that was really the driving force for me to incorporate Carly's legacy. And so, I drafted up a constitution, thought about the aims of what the foundation would be. And essentially, that would be a harm prevention organisation, primarily focusing on online safety education, legislative reform, creating awareness in the community about this crime type, but also having balance around not scaring the crap out of people, for people to understand that what happened to Carly is the worst case scenario, but there are many other harms that happen online, including cyberbullying, image-based abuse, sextortion, and all of these other horrible things. And how could we equip the community? How can we equip and empower kids so that they understand that the choices they make online affect their happiness or, create suffering? And so really, it was really thinking on that constitution and thinking about how can we practically make a difference and how can we prevent crimes against kids? And so I took that constitution into the department and incorporated the Carly Ryan Foundation. And that really began a journey of, trying to change the online safety landscape in Australia, and which we've been able to achieve. And so, really the driving force behind her legacy is really the power of love. It's driven with purpose. The motivation is real. It's about genuinely caring about kids and genuinely wanting to do what I can while I'm here to help as many as I possibly can. And so, really, it's just been a whirlwind for me. It just really took off relatively quickly. And we began with creating an education program for schools that was much needed. Parents are really lost in this area. They didn't know how to support their kids in this space. And, they weren't brought up with this technology. So it was overwhelming and daunting, and parents were fearful. And, we just wanted to make this as good as we could for the community to really equip them with the tools they need to really protect their kids and ensure that the kids are having really positive experiences online and using the internet as it was intended to be used, for connection, for opportunity, for, keeping in touch with family overseas, and unfortunately, just as we have in the real world, people take advantage of things that are created in a negative way. And so, we've just seen this huge rise in, criminals using the online space, the anonymity of the online space to take advantage of others, to harm others, to exploit children. And, for me, I just wasn't having it. I just had this sheer determination of, this is not going to happen. This is not going to happen to another kid. And, what are we going to do about it? And I have limited time. So it was just, let's get going and roll.
So thank you so much for sharing all of that. You are, I always say this, I'm going to say it anyway for the record, you're the biggest badass I've ever met, man. Seriously. Like, you're the real deal, man. Seriously, you're legit. It's incredible where you've come from and where you're at now, and I really want you to I want to explore a lot of that because it's an inspiration, it really is.
Thank you. Well, like I said before, it's incredible what you can do when you are motivated through love. The love for my daughter is so huge, so endless. It's like, gosh, what would she want me to do? Think on that all the time. And I honestly believe Carly would want me to do everything in my power to prevent another child from facing what she had to face. I truly believe it in my heart. And she was such a compassionate kid. She was so loving. She was the light of the room. Yeah, she was very creative. She'd always kind of stand up for her friends. She'd always, you know, gosh, I'll give you one example. I gave her money for shoes one day and she came home with no shoes. And I said, well, what happened? What'd you spend the money on? She said, Mum, there were some really hungry people sitting outside of Macca's, which is McDonald's, by the way.
Macca's, Mackie D's.
Yeah. So she bought some burgers, a bunch of burgers for these homeless people. And, she was like 13. So, that's just who she was. So, in order to honor her in the best way I could, I always think on what she would do, the way that she always lent on that kind of compassion and care for others. And, really, I just thought about and still think about, everything that she would, want to see. And, I want to do everything again in my power to make sure that we're, supporting young people to have positive experiences online and intercepting those criminals that are, really trying to harm our kids. And, so really it just sort of began with that education program with Carly Ryan Foundation, and then it moved quickly on to advising on legislation, and then the authoring of Carly's Law. And that was probably the hugest turning point for Carly's legacy, because I really thought about how was it possible that Gary Newman, the man that murdered my daughter, was able to falsify his identity and age to Carly online, and there'd be no criminal recourse. There'd be no, offense for that. And, I couldn't do anything. When I called the police, with, concerns, thinking something's not right here, they literally couldn't do anything because, criminally he hadn't committed any kind of an offense. So that's really when I thought about Carly's Law and sat with a senator in Australia and said, okay, I need to draft legislation that makes it an offence for people to lie about their age to a minor under the age of 16, and then attempt to meet that minor, falsify their identity. And so Carly's Law was born, and that was introduced in 2017 and passed federally in Australia.
So that was 10 years after the event.
So Carly's Law was officially passed in Australia in 2017 as federal law. And Australian Federal Police said that they kind of use it like a gateway law. It gets them in the door. So it's more of a proactive law than, a reactive law. So, what it helps them to do is interrupt that meeting. So, they're able to go in, arrest an individual for falsifying their identity online in order to meet a child. Police often will make an arrest using Carly's Law, but then they find additional, criminal activity when they're making that arrest. And that could be terabytes of child abuse material on the computers or phones. It could be paraphernalia, it could be anything. And so then they apply additional charges on top of that. But the whole aim of Carly's Law is to prevent the harm from happening in the first place, because, once a child is harmed, if they survive that criminal act, they go on to suffer. And depending on their level of support and resilience will depend on, their ability to recover. So Carly's Law was exceptionally important. Then the UN contacted me and said, it was the first law of its kind in the world. And how can we help you to get this into the criminal codes of as many countries as possible? And so that really catapulted Carly's legacy forward and really put me on a global stage at that point.
So that's hard to believe when you said, there's no law of it. What you just described, that it's crazy to think that.
And, you think they've got laws against fraud. They come with quite serious penalties. So, how is it possible for people to fake their age and identity to kids online in order to trick them and have them generating, self-generated explicit material, or, coercing them into doing things that they would never normally do, manipulating them, it's just absolutely awful. And so, really it was my duty to do what I could. And then, of course, when the law was passed, it was a huge celebration. But, I had no real time to sit and digest the impact of Carly's law. I just had to keep on getting on with it,
Yeah.
And so then I advised on a range of other legislation in Australia, the Online Safety Act, Release on Licence Bill in South Australia, the legislation to open the office of the E-Safety Commissioner in Australia, and contributed to a working group, the initial working group for the E-Safety Office, which, advised on education materials and, all kinds of information that the E-Safety Commissioner would apply. And, from there, advocated for the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation in Australia. Australia, in my view, is really leading the way in relation to online safety. And, now, of course, we've seen, I've been involved in the national rollout of the social media ban for children under the age of 16.
Can we just land on that? I've jumped straight on that. I'm like, right, pause. Okay, because this is, for me, something that I have to, as you know, the work that I do, huge issue, as you obviously know, right? So can you just really sort of be more clear on that? Because, it is a huge, huge thing, and a massive problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge thing. I mean, since the advent of, smartphones, research shows a huge decline in mental health of young people. Anxiety levels have risen exponentially. It's just, and researchers can't attribute those changes in mental health spikes to anything else that's happened in community, countries. It's directly connected to, the advent of smartphones, social media sites. And so, we have an anxious generation of kids that are, disconnected from their real life, and they're not learning those fundamental life skills that we all learned growing up. Communication, how to do the most practical things in life. They just, as soon as you give your child a smartphone, that phone will draw all of their attention away from the life that's happening around them. They'll get sucked into this world of, misinformation. We have kids that are being fed really, destructive,
Disturbing.
disturbing content. And once they look at something disturbing, then of course algorithms pull them down the rabbit hole of more disturbing information. And we're seeing kids with terrible mental health issues. They don't feel that they're good enough, or they're never enough, because they just can't live up to the, fabulous world portrayed on a lot of social media profiles. They are terribly anxious. They just are beside themselves when they don't get enough likes or friend requests. They're just, being groomed online by, inappropriate criminals. They're being, DM'd, messaged by strangers. They're being offered fake opportunities, which, puts them in a very vulnerable position. And kids are looking for validation, and often they're looking for it from people online. And so that opens them up to, a lot of harms. And it's just, for a child, they just don't have the life experience, the emotional intelligence, the ability to navigate a space that was made for adults.
So when you say child, because you've done a lot of work in schools. I've been with you in schools in Australia. And I know the work you do, which is incredible. So you're on the front line. You're talking from direct experience of getting in front of these young people.
And we get disclosures at every session. There's always children and kids that come forward with an issue of some kind, whether they are beside themselves with anxiety because they didn't get enough likes and what should they do and how should they manage it, or, they hit a link and they were taken to a porn site and, were beside themselves because they saw something they can't unsee and it's completely frightened them in relation to future relationships, or they've been, groomed or they've been bullied and they're really struggling or, there's just so many things we get disclosures about,
So it's
you know?
information overload, right?
Mm.
Information overload, like it's just too much too soon, right?
It's being, manipulated and, and then, kids are really open and willing to share their information. They don't always have, those inbuilt safety mechanisms, it's something that we learn. And so it makes them extremely vulnerable, and particularly kids that are looking for that validation. Right? Or maybe they don't have a lot of connection at home, or maybe their family's going through struggle, or, so they're looking for kind of advice and counseling via people online and various users. And it just opens them up to all sorts of harms. And then, we just, it really pisses me off that, these social media companies have just been free to just, profit off the backs of our innocent children without putting any safety by design in their platforms. There's no duty of care in relation to them, and what they're doing. And, it's just unbelievable to me. So
can I just interject, right? So I don't want to name, obviously it's quite a broad term, social media, but, without getting into it and naming, and calling people out, because that's not what we want to be doing. Although I know that behind the scenes, that's exactly what you're doing face to face, right? You're going to some of these people and you're taking them on, right? That's what you're doing. You're on a mission, right?
oh, yeah.
But with the age thing, 16. So what is it at the moment? What's it set at the moment?
Well, social media companies generally, in their terms and conditions will have, you cannot use our platform if you're under the age of 13.
13, okay.
Generally,
Yeah.
a lot of social media sites. Now, that's in their terms and conditions, and, you would read that. Kids don't read the terms and conditions, and they just put in a fake date of birth. It's pretty simple, and they've been doing it for years and years.
Yeah.
And so, really, social media platforms need to have age assurance technology. They have the technology. They just need to implement it, and they need to make their young users an absolute priority and protect them from, the immense amount of harm out there and all of those out in the world that, make huge profits through exploiting children.
So I heard it said, I think I was with you. Remember when you was in London and someone used the term when we went to I can't remember where we were, but it was somewhere in Westminster and you had to do some meetings here in London. And I remember someone who was speaking or whatever was going on at that day, and it was all based around what we're talking about. And they said, using an analogy of it's like we are all using the internet without a seatbelt.
Mhm.
Do you remember? And it's like there will be a time when we put the seatbelt on
Mhm.
and we'll all look back and go, fucking hell. Like, do you remember when we used to just let everyone go on the internet without a seatbelt on?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
kind of what it's like, right?
Yeah, and
Remember
so
that?
the idea behind the social media ban in Australia is to protect young people from all of those harms. And, like I said, we're dealing with an anxious generation, an addicted generation. A lot of these platforms, in their very design, are designed to be addictive. They're the scroll, the checking in, it's just it's really, it's a business model, and they're very clever at it. And, with kids, how are they meant to kind of navigate, these platforms? And, so really it's about protecting children under the age of 16. And then when they're more, resilient, a little more mature, they have a little more life skills, then they're in a better position to be able to, manage some of these spaces, still with, of course, guidance and support, but, making sure that we're still delivering education programs in schools so that when kids are of age in Australia, they're able to manage these spaces and sort of know what to do, where to report, and how to, they're just not so negatively impacted, and they're left just to grow up and be and connect with each other and be with each other rather than, how many times have you seen a bunch of kids sitting with each other? Every single one of them is on the phone. They
Yeah, I mean, it's
a
just
huge issue.
yeah. I mean, it's mind-boggling. I always say this, right? I mean, I found it really hard. My teens, like that coming of age, puberty, being young and, trying to navigate the world. I mean, to me, I was freaking overwhelmed as it was without all this mad stuff that we're talking about. It's mind-boggling to me. I still feel, quite overwhelmed by it all myself, and I don't even have a social media account.
Yeah, it's just
So
it's crazy, and, I've watched it evolve, since incorporating Carly's legacy in 2010. I've watched it.
yeah.
Now dealing with AI, um, you know, deep fakes and, oh gosh, it's just
Oh,
and it
don't.
can be really overwhelming, and it can be really overwhelming for parents. A lot of parents, as I said earlier, were not brought up with this technology, and so, they think their kids are safe with their phone in their hand in their bedroom, because they're in their home, the doors are locked. But essentially, by giving your child a device and allowing them to be on that device with access to the entire world via that mini computer, you're literally opening all the doors and windows in your house and inviting anyone in to,
Putting it. That's a good
access
way of
your
putting it.
child, to manipulate your child, to take advantage of your child. It's just, it's a mini computer and
Yeah,
has
that's
the ability to do so much. And kids, as I said before, don't have the life skill to manage an adult space. And so I'm all for the social media ban in Australia. I've supported it. I attended both the social media summits, one in Sydney, one in Adelaide, and met with the Attorney General, Federal Attorney General when I was there recently. And, I'm all for the government, the Australian government supporting this. And I really commend, all the lawmakers in Australia and the relevant politicians for making it a priority because
Are they behind it? Are they behind it?
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And, the latest research from Childlight, is quite astonishing. It's just, it's over 350 million children are exploited online every single year.
Whoa.
It's just insane. So for me, it's just absolutely ugh,
It's mental. So
yeah, crazy.
obviously you're a massive you have a massive profile in Australia with what we're talking about, of course. You've built that up naturally over the course of what's happened. You've just told us exactly that journey. There's so much more to you than what we're talking about, so much more. So um I think it's amazing that you put your neck on the line because you're doing what a lot of people don't dare to do, right?
Well, again, when you've been through something that I've been through, when you've seen your own child suffer so greatly, it's
You got nothing to lose, man.
I've got nothing to lose, and I just really feel that it's my duty uh, to do something.
Mm.
For me, it's just we've just got to do everything in our power to make sure that we support young people and prevent those horrendous crimes. And it's just there's very little time. Every single day children are being exploited in the online space.
Yeah.
It's just it's awful, and I really want to highlight Child Light's latest report, and I'm going to bring it up in a minute.
Yeah, go for it. Because you collaborate with the Australian. It's like they've got this a separate like a special unit, haven't they, to deal with this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. I mean, they've got the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation is basically the federal body. But then in each state of Australia, there's joint anti-child exploitation teams that are responsible, for this crime type. So, it's really, really important that we, support those law enforcement officers, that we do everything we can to make sure they have the tech they need, that they're supported. I've done a lot of that as well, advocating for funding for law enforcement, support for law enforcement. I've done a whole lot. Sometimes I sit here and think, gosh, wow, so much has happened. And
You've only
it's just like, wow.
You've only touched on a fraction of what you're about. I know the full extent because obviously I know. I've been part of that journey more in like recent years. Since we met, but from what I know in the short time I've known you, it's like whoa. It's incredible. It really is. Your reach goes global, and I think you're in America for a reason, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, this crime type is borderless. The man that murdered my daughter tried to meet girls in America, in Singapore. There are offenders all over the world trying to access Australian kids and children all over the world. And so, it was a no-brainer to think about one day expanding Carly's legacy beyond Australian shores. For me, as I said earlier, Child Light's Global Index on Child Sexual Exploitation and Abuse Prevalence Report was just, a real eye-opener for a lot of people in this work. And I want to share that with the listeners just to get understanding of what we're dealing with, and that we're dealing with a global pandemic. This is a public safety issue. So Child Light's Global Index report showed that over 300 million children under the age of 18 have been affected by online child sexual exploitation and abuse in the last 12 months. 1 in 8 children globally have been subjected to online solicitation in the last 12 months, such as unwanted sexual talk, which can include non-consensual sexting, unwanted sexual questions, and unwanted sexual act requests by adults or other youths. 1 in 8 children have experienced non-consensual taking, sharing, and or exposure to sexual images and videos. 11% of men in the United States, 7% of men in the UK, and 7.5% of men in Australia report that they have engaged in online behaviours at some point in their lifetime that will be classed as online child sexual abuse offending. As of 2023, 11% of the United States population is roughly equivalent to 36.8 million people. 7.5% of Australian men is about 938,000 people that have admitted to offending against children online, and have also stated that if they could have kept it in secret, they would have gone on to hands-on offend.
Man, that's
I know that's a tricky subject, and I know a lot of people are, oh gosh, I don't want to hear this, or
exactly.
oh gosh, this is too confronting. But if we don't confront this and face it, we're going to continue to lose kids at a rapid rate.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest, right? I'm going to put myself out there and be honest, right? what you just said there, I get it, because before I sort of knew you, the only reason I know a lot more about this stuff because, I meet people like you and I get educated and I listen and I lean into it a little bit and I want to know, because I'm not directly affected. I don't think I'm directly affected like you have been, of course not. But I give a shit. And because of the work I do working with younger people, it sort of it correlates, right? So I was one of those people, I think, that was like, oh, I just don't want to go there. I don't want to hear this because my brain can't, I can't allow it. I'm going to feel discombobulated, if that's the right word. If I let this information in, I don't want to let it in because I'm all right over here, mate. Thank you very much. Don't spoil my life. I don't want to hear this. I want to be in denial and ignore that bad stuff's going on. But it is going on,
It is going on, and our kids need our support. They often don't have a voice, and we need to be their voice. We need to be their protectors, and it's people don't want to think that humans are capable of such evil. Can't really comprehend it. We don't want to comprehend it. We want to believe that there is some goodness somewhere inside of these people. But the reality is there just is not. A lot of offenders are not rehabilitatable. They can only be managed. And, we're dealing with opportunistic offenders that genuinely don't care, about anything else than their own sexual gratification. And they love to control others. And so I think as a society, we have to accept that these people exist in our world. And with that acceptance, as difficult as it is, we need to make sure that we're helping to create awareness, and it doesn't take much to direct someone to a website like ours, carlyryanfoundation.com, to connect somebody with a reporting mechanism, to just give a shout out in their community, or their school, what kind of online safety education is happening, try and find someone that you could recommend to a school for online safety education, just talk to young people around you about it. Are you practicing protective behaviors online? Are you being mindful of what you're doing and who you're talking to? It doesn't take much to have an open conversation with it. Doesn't mean that everyone's got to get out there and be an activist or, go in as far as I have, but it's just those little things that you can do. You can share our online safety contract with a family, littlest of things can prevent a crime from happening. So many young people have approached our staff, our presenters, and said, my sister was going to go and meet somebody at the park and she saw your presentation and decided not to do it. Or, you just don't know the impact that one conversation can have in preventing a child from being put in a situation where their choices could be taken from them. We just had a school recently where a bunch of girls were at a sleepover. They were sexually, inappropriately contacted by a male on Snapchat, and I think also on TikTok. And he was sending them explicit material and wanting them to send explicit material back. And that had just happened with a group of, 12-year-old girls in a sleepover overnight. Beautiful young kids that were completely innocent, but were coerced and manipulated by an adult online. And that's as quickly and as easily as this can happen, and kids are being, exploited at a rapid rate. Carly, she was manipulated and led to believe that she was loved and cared for over a 18-month period, and that she was actually genuinely talking to a young boy her own age. So now they're getting on apps and within, 20 minutes they're being exploited or being coerced into generating sexually explicit material. And so really we have to come together as a society and really have our wits about us when we have our kids in these spaces and on these devices because, again, they're kids, and they're navigating adult spaces. And some of the harms that they come up against are just awful and they don't have the skills to be able to manage, or sometimes they don't even know how to say no.
Yeah.
They don't have the ability to navigate some of these.
What's one of the uh, common traits of what, like, the means to deceive and to be deceptive? How would they manage to coerce a vulnerable young person into,
Well, they
complying?
offer counseling, friendship, compliments, tell a child that they're really beautiful or really special, and particularly if there's a gap in a child's life. Let's say they have a missing parent or they might have, you know, um, their home life might be a little disruptive, or maybe their parents went through a divorce and they're feeling rather vulnerable, or something's happened around them in their world that's given some vulnerability. Well, a predator or a criminal will look for vulnerability. And once they find the vulnerability, they will look to fill that gap for that child. And they will, gain the trust, gain the confidence from the child. And once they've built that confidence and trust, and they're giving a child what they want to hear, then often they will then start turning the conversation into a more sexualized conversation. And then they will start manipulating a child into believing that this sexual behavior is perfectly normal for their age. And it's perfectly normal to be exploring these things. And then we'll generally get them to send explicit material. Now, sometimes once they send that explicit material, then threats come. If you don't send me more images or videos, I'll put this all over the internet and tell your parents. We're seeing kids literally committing suicide because of this
Wow.
all the time. They don't know what to do. They freeze in fear, and they just completely freak out. And then we have serious mental health issues. And as I said, worse, kids taking their own lives. And this is happening. And I know this is a heavy conversation, and I know it might be difficult for some people to hear. But it's just so important that people are made aware of the cunning nature of criminals so that then they can protect their kids. That if you know how a criminal operates, you understand the way a criminal works, then you're better equipped to protect your children from them.
Mm. Yeah. So the law as it stands, Carly's law,
Mhm.
so it's been implemented
In
in
Australia.
Australia. Outside of Australia, where you getting where have you managed to, are you still working on that, obviously?
Still working on that in America.
Yeah.
So I am part of a number of working groups around the world, some of which are, really helping me to kind of gain connection and, traction. And essentially, really trying to, if I have to go state by state in America, I will. There's quite a few states interested in this in America. But ultimately, I'd love to see this become federal law in the States and in the UK and, a range of other countries if I can. But I also helped to draft legislation in Texas in relation to third-party solicitation law, which would make, say, if somebody gives their child to an offender, they will be charged in the same way that the offender would be, and also changing terminology within law. So at the moment in legislation here in the States, they use the word child pornography. And, I feel really strongly around the fact that, we're not dealing with pornography here. Pornography is made for the pleasure of adults. What's happening to our children is torture and rape, and we should be making sure that the terminology for what's happening to our children is changed in legislation from child
Yeah.
pornography, child sexual exploitation material. So I've been working on that.
It's just
The
what you just said there, just that whole, as you just said that, my brain was trying to, comprehend what you're saying as if it's, this is very real. And it's like, the way you've said it, it's just, it really hits home. This is a real thing that we're talking about. It's like, it just doesn't, to me, it's like, it's almost like so shockingly, I'm not saying unbelievable because it's happening. But do you know what I mean by what I'm saying? It's just, that's how my brain sort of reacts to it. And I know it's real.
Oh, yeah, it's, I deal with this day in and day out, and I wish it wasn't
Mm.
real. I truly, truly do. But, for thousands of years, we've had people, harm others. And now, in this day and age, they have the internet to be able to do it anonymously, and easily from to the comfort of their own home or
Yeah.
wherever they are. So, terrorist acts, you know, criminals exploiting children, fraudsters, or, there's it's criminals have migrated from the offline space to the online space.
Well, can I ask you a question, right? What is what do you think is wrong with people?
Honestly, I don't know. I wish I had the answer to that question so I could find a practical way of, you know, changing, what's happened to people. I just think I don't know, I just think some people are truly broken for whatever reason, and not all offenders come from a child abuse background. A lot of the times it's got to do with control, being able to control a child, being able to control a person, um, and, it's a level of depravity I think people like you and I can never comprehend. I can never comprehend what drove Gary Newman to manipulate, to spend 18 months manipulating my child in order to meet her, to murder her. Why anyone would wanna take the life away from an innocent child. It's beyond a normal person's level of comprehension, it really is, and I think if you sit there and try and figure out why a person is wired this way, where this comes from, where is evil born? I just think you drive yourself crazy trying to figure it out.
Mm.
So again, my focus is not on the offender as much as in the victim.
Yeah.
So my focus is very victim focused, very survivor focused, and what can we do to prevent these crimes from happening in the first place? But then also, how can we support victims of crime and
Yeah.
survivors?
And
Yeah.
and can I just interject, right? So for you to be able to do this, what you do, right? Same as what I do. Different stories. We've got different stories, but our driver is the same because we've been through something really, that was very
Uh-huh.
traumatic. Obviously, it's not comparable, different stories. But we're compelled to, serve other people, right? I know what I have to do to be able to do that. I have to first and foremost make sure that I pick myself up and become a badass, to be centered within myself and become stronger so that you know, if I'm no good myself, I can't help other people, right? And I know your journey of but for other people, what I'm trying to ask you is, if you'd be so kind, you know, how from 2007 when that all happened, when that played out, you chose life, right? To do what you do to serve other people. And like how for anyone listening, how did you manage to pull yourself out of that?
I think in that groundless grief, in that immense suffering, the gift in that was, as I said earlier, a real sense of clarity and connection. And I think when you go through that amount of suffering, I think the best way it's described to me is the layers of yourself kind of dissolve and your ego, everything. You just kind of come back to sort of a pure nature, like um
You're like a fucking Jedi. So yeah.
absent absent of absent of all the worldly conditioning that we've had
Mm.
growing up. So you just kind of come back to your true self. And in that space, you just have this, I don't know, it's very difficult to explain in words. It's like, I was offered all of these different drugs from doctors, and I just kind of had this is what I'm talking about, clarity. I had this feeling, I knew that if I touched any of those drugs, I would lose connection to self, I'd lose connection to my daughter, and I don't know what would have happened to me. So I sat in the pain. Now, people would be like, "What in the hell? What in the fuck are you doing?" Wanting to sit with that kind of pain and trauma. Well, I didn't want to, but I had to. I had to sit with it. I had to feel it. I had to scream. I had to cry. I had to run. I walked for miles and miles. I kind of did everything I could to try and shift that immense pain from my body by, moving my body, by trying to practice self-care, practicing meditation, but it was hell, and there's no other way around it. To be able to transform pain is to sit in it and feel it. And what happens when you do that, in our society, when people feel any kind of pain, they generally try and, some people may try and numb themselves, find a way to distract from it. Any distraction will do, other than sitting and feeling pain. And that is, I guess, what I learnt in my journey, and what could potentially help others, is if you can sit in that pain and feel it, allow yourself to really feel it, cry your eyes out, scream, do whatever you got to do, but feel that pain, you will come out of that pain, and I promise you it will end. You will have pauses where you can get a breath. You will have moments of rest in between. You will gain a strength that is quite indescribable. I felt like something grew in me, almost like a rod of strength in my core. And it was like, okay, right. I'm going to push my own suffering aside. I'm going to focus on what I can do, and then found my purpose. So, not everybody is going to go on to, do advocacy work, and not everyone has to. Everybody's journey is individual to them and unique to them. It doesn't mean that you've got to get up and go and help save the world, or, go and do whatever it is that, you thought that you might have to do. Simply surviving and being able to come out the other end, being able to breathe in and out, and being able to move through the world, and be okay is a huge, huge achievement. So I think it's just being kind to self, connecting to self, meditating, as I said, sitting and feeling that pain, allowing yourself to feel it and sit in it. And then what happens is, gosh, you just have this incredible transformation. And for me, it was just no looking back. It was just, let's go. And I just really thought about what needed to happen, and nothing was too difficult. It was like, it's almost like the roadblocks kind of dissolve. You just kind of like, okay, I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to go for it. And this just sheer determination, and that got me in front of the Prime Minister in Australia. That got me, speaking at highest levels of government around the world. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, they're people. They're just people.
Mm.
Just like me. The only difference is that they are in a position where they can affect law, where they can make changes that, affect the entire community, and can, literally, the decisions they make in government can literally save the lives of children.
Mhm.
And so, but at the end of the day, they're mothers, fathers, family people. They have children. It's like, come on, we need to work together to do what we can to protect our kids. Our kids are our future, literally. and we need to do everything in our power to help them to navigate the world, to give them access to adequate mental health services, to support them, to teach them, to guide them, and to protect them.
Wow. I mean, I have heard that, what you just described, I know that journey you was on. I've heard it from you before, but it always blows my mind, It's really inspiring to anyone listening, no matter how bad you think your life is, like your message is, it's like you can get through it. It will pass. No matter how horror it is, no matter how bad it is. I mean, God Christ. I mean, it's mind blowing.
Temporary, to a certain point, everything is forever changing and moving and evolving. And, there were times when I thought I'd literally die. There were times when I thought my heart would just stop beating, where the nervous system was just a shuddering mess where, I mean, I can't even describe to anyone listening the pain and just not being able to stop the pain. The only thing when you could sleep, those short moments of rest was the only respite you'd get from that immense pain. But again, I tried to give my body everything it could need to be able to withstand that pain. And, a lot of self-care, warming, grounding foods, exercise, just, getting out there and power walking or running. It just forces the pain off your chest. It just forces it out of your body. It's just so important. And then again, grounding and meditating.
Yeah. Just to eat sushi. Just to eat a lot of sushi.
Just putting things in your body that are going to help sustain you, whether that's more soup, having a bath, like just doing everything in your power to, and then also too surrendering, and being open to help.
Yeah.
Like call in as much help as you possibly can from every resource around you that you have. Vulnerability is such a powerful thing, to be vulnerable like that just creates immense connection. And, don't be afraid to ask for help. All of us in our lifetime at some point need real help. And boy, did I call in help. I knew I needed it, so I called for it.
Because I have to, I work with a lot of families, parents, and their young, daughters, sons, mainly sons. And, trauma is a common ground for everyone. And everyone's trauma is, real different. Yeah. And what you just described there was my experience of how I navigated trauma. Well, no, there's two ways of doing it. My old former life, I navigated trauma by medicating on it. And there's so many different ways, as we know, to do that. Excuse me. And in my recovery from that trauma, my true recovery from that trauma, which was a daily reprieve, still can be because it's still there. It's a deep wound, the trauma that I went through in my life anyway. I, like you, I've learned to breathe through it and to be with it.
Yeah, to sit with it, to feel it, and not to be afraid of it. It's really scary, and I think one of the other things that I'd like to point out that was really helpful for me that others listening could potentially get some benefit from was understanding what was happening to my body. So getting really practical information about what happens to a person's body in trauma. And so that when things do happen, you have disassociation, when you have, anxiety, when you have certain triggers that trigger, immense pain or whatever is happening, or the shudders in your body, or understanding what happens to your body really gives a sense of understanding and reduces the amount of fear, because it's so scary. You don't know what's going to happen, if you're going to survive it, if you're going to make it, if you're going to be able to, if you're just going to end up rocking back and forth in a bloody mental ward. You just don't know what's going to unfold. And the human body is extremely resilient and incredible. And the way that my body held me in that trauma was nothing short of a miracle. And it did, and I didn't touch a drop of alcohol. I didn't do anything. I just stayed clear.
It's incredible. Unbelievable.
And what that did was it just gave me a level of resilience that now anything that comes my way is just nothing.
Yeah.
In comparison to that. So as difficult as it is in the interim, like at the beginning, is understand what trauma is, what it does to your body, what are some of the things that will happen, just the practical things that happen to the body, and find out what are some of the things you can do to support your body going through this grief process, and then who out there around you can help. And for those who are helping others survive, you don't necessarily have to do anything for them, but just listen. A lot of people avoid trauma because they don't know how to handle it, or what to do, or what to say, or, when Carly, when I lost her, a lot of people just vanished. It was so overwhelming and so traumatic. People didn't know what to do, how to handle it. And what they didn't realize, they didn't have to do anything. Bring over a warm meal, drop it off. I just wanted to let you know I care and I'm thinking about you. Is there anything that I can do to help you? Can I go shopping for you? Can I do this? I'm just going to sit here and listen, and don't say a word, just listen, hug, connect. There's nothing you have to particularly do, just be there. That's the biggest gift you can give somebody who's in suffering is just be present. And, I can't do anything to change this situation, but what I can do is support you. What I can do is be here. What I can do is hear you. What I can do is practical things to support you. And that's it.
Wow. Such a simple premise, but so hard to do for some, because it's really
Some things you just can't fix. Some things it's like, how you make it rough. Yeah, some things will come.
because you got in front of I hope you don't mind me disclosing this, you sat in front of more than one counselor.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There were several that were sent to me by the homicide officers. And they were just, it was like a deer in headlights. They were so overwhelmed, they just didn't want to continue with me. There was only one that stepped forward, and she was instrumental in my support and recovery. And again, she'd just listen, hold the space, and just be there with me. And, that was more helpful than anything. I think, often too, some professionals want to go over the suffering over and over again. And in my view, for me personally, that wasn't helpful. It just brought me back to the trauma and brought me back into that moment. And it just caused incredible, grief. So for me, it was about finding someone who could help me in a practical sense and hold me emotionally. And, give me connection to some really, amazing tools, and getting me in for massages and physiotherapy, and, helping to navigate that to get my body to sort of start operating again properly. Because, a lot of things just sort of shut down. I couldn't eat. I was in a bad way. And so, that kind of support really helped me. Now, I know this journey is different for everybody, but for me, the biggest thing is don't give yourself a hard time and don't give yourself a time limit. Grief is different for everybody, whether you're grieving a loved one, the end of a relationship, whatever it might be, give yourself time. Give yourself space, give yourself love, and really, pull in, as I said, as much support around you as you possibly can. And, just be kind to yourself,
Mm. So at some point, did you just wake up and go, fuck, I feel like I can live a bit now?
Oh, I still feel at times, even now, why am I here and she isn't?
Of course.
And I would give my life a gazillion times over to give her her life back. It sucks.
And that's
It's
sorry, go on.
the pain doesn't it you the more time without her, the harder it is, actually. And I'm not gonna try and, sugarcoat that for anyone listening. It's just the reality. But what happens is you learn to be able to manage the pain
Mm.
and you learn to be able to, live with it. So rather than pushing that grief in the background, you allow it to sit with you.
Mm.
By allowing it to be there with you, you just learn to live with it and you learn to be able to just find ways to be able to just live. And over time, it becomes a little easier, a little easier. And then also too, for me, my focus is so much on purpose and trying to save children. That's really helped me because, finding something to do, finding something that brings, some level of joy, whether, as I said, not everyone's going to be an advocate for something, but maybe finding a hobby, beginning painting, like doing something that brings some creativity, or go and learn a course about something or start photography, or doing something that gives purpose. And also volunteering is a fantastic way of, being able to help heal. When you volunteer and you do good things for others, it's just the best feeling in the world, in my opinion.
Mm.
It just gives so much back to you, even though you're giving of yourself.
Yeah.
So it's just, finding finding yourself in all of that, and also finding some kind of purpose.
And I think that's why I think it's so brilliant that you've ended up where you have, with who you have, doing what you're doing. I think getting away from the crime scene, if that's what you can call it, your native Australia, it's giving you the space to actually allow yourself to live more, which you
Yeah, I
have.
think
But
me, it was just, you imagine being thrust into media with no media experience. I was on national TV live being asked what happened to my daughter and what am I doing now, and having to tell her story of suffering over and over and over again, and then doing presentations to community and parents crying and, sharing their own trauma. Imagine doing that 5 days a week and all of the media and everything else. I mean, God, it was just, oh, I can't even describe it. It was like just basically torturing myself. But also on the other side of it was like, damn it, we don't have enough time to be focusing on our own suffering. Push that shit aside and get on with it. And so I just pushed and pushed myself. When COVID hit, that was a real instrumental moment where I was like, okay, I've got to get Carly's legacy overseas and take it beyond Aussie shores, because kids were becoming more vulnerable because they're online for connection in COVID. And of course, we had the lockdown in Australia and it prevented me from doing very much. So I just went to the Home Affairs Minister and said, please let me out of the country. And so I can continue to, this is a
yeah,
perfect opportunity to see if we can get Carly's law, into other countries because the exploitation is not going to stop. And so that really got me over to the States and sort of going back and forth and navigating that awful pandemic.
Crazy time, man. Didn't you end up in a hotel in on lockdown
We
in
ended up in
Sydney, wasn't it?
when I flew back from
How long was you in that hotel for?
weeks.
2 weeks, and you couldn't come out?
No, it was awful. And there were so many people suffering through it. Oh gosh, it was just so dreadful. People had terrible mental health issues and, it's awful. No distraction, having to sit with themselves.
Yeah.
And I got myself an exercise bike delivered to my door.
What, to the hotel? To the hotel door?
Yeah.
Did you?
That's that damn thing and just sat there and rode and watched telly because, shit, there was nothing much else I could do besides having meetings and, reading, having a bubble bath. It was just awful. And when I got out of there, the sounds of Sydney it was just so loud. And after being quiet and still for kind of 2 weeks, but oh yeah, it was just awful. The whole thing was awful for a lot of people and,
Mad.
people that lost loved ones and
Mm.
oh gosh, it was just dreadful. And, but coming into the States again, I just was like, I have limited time. I got to do this, and I'm not going to be fearful. I'm
Yeah.
not going to be fearful of this. And in my personal case, I'd rather, and this is obviously, not everyone's idea, but I would rather risk getting it than not living. Not doing the work.
I know what you mean, yeah, totally.
And, and I don't say that in disrespect to those that have lost their lives or suffered greatly from the pandemic. Of course, it's absolutely dreadful. But in my personal case,
Yeah.
personal experience, that's what I chose to do for me. And I was fortunate enough not to get sick at any time, even though my staff were terrified. What are you thinking? Traveling overseas in the middle of a pandemic. We can't afford to lose you. I listened and said, what? That's a risk
So
I'm prepared to take.
so have you've got Carly Ryan Foundation in native Australia, and it's
And
rolled
in
in.
the United States,
Is it?
we're a 501c3 in America,
So it's official? Of course it is, yeah.
official. And then I'm a member, I was going to say to you before, groups that I'm on the OSEAC coalition in the United States. So that's the Ending Online Sexual Exploitation and Abuse of Children Coalition, the ICAC Prevention Specialist Working Group in the United States, the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation Prevention Education Working Group, We Protect Global Alliance, the Australian National Co-Design Working Group under the Attorney General, Interfaith Alliance, Ministry of Interior, United Arab Emirates,
Yeah.
Survivor Group, Safer AI for Children Coalition in Australia. So,
Dear, you get about, didn't you? You get
yeah, doing a lot to contribute to online safety and preventing exploitation of children all over the world. I just advised the White House on the UN Cybercrime Convention.
So do you go in the White House? You probably can't say too much
No,
about.
no, no, no.
Oh,
No. They have listening sessions and,
okay.
where often questions are sent over and then, I answer those questions and try and support where I can. But a UN Cybercrime Convention will, ratify 193 countries to have the same laws in relation to child exploitation and abuse. And so, the articles in that, Articles 14 to 16 of the convention are most important to me in relation to exploitation of kids. And so I've supported that, supporting the United States in joining the convention. And, from that, I think, I'm becoming more and more known here now in the United States. And as I said, I had no plan in ever staying. But then, lightning strikes when you're least expecting it. And, for whatever reason, my husband happened to be in America, it seems.
He's awesome. I love him. He's so good. So, you haven't mentioned, so I'm going to mention it. And we call it an OBE in England.
Mm-hmm.
What's it called? I've forgotten. In Australia.
An OAM.
OAM. What does that stand for?
I mean, Order of Australia Medal.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you've got one, right?
Yeah.
Don't undersell it. Like, I'm trying to, this is a big up.
No, you don't do, I don't know. It's just a funny thing, I guess. You don't do the work for recognition.
No, I know. Of course, I know that. You know that.
Yeah, I know. It's just kind of a weird feeling because my daughter suffered so greatly. I don't know. It's just a mama thing, I think. I'm just like, oh gosh. But saying that, I feel extremely humbled and very grateful for the awards that I've received.
Of course.
Order of Australia Medal was just such an honour. And now I have this OAM on the end of my name for life.
It's mad, so mad.
And the award I received in Abu Dhabi by the royal family, oh my gosh, that was like Mother of the Nation award. Things that I've experienced, I just, it's just insane to me.
Because when I first met you, which was pre-COVID, I think is about 2000 whatever, 19, 18, I can't remember the exact date.
Oh no.
Pre-COVID. You was obviously a badass then, of course, bloody hell. But then I remember as we were starting to, have talks and we were staying in contact regular, and I came to Australia. It was just one thing after the other. That's why I called you Soda. Doda, Soda. Yoda with an S, Sonya. Soda. Because it was just like one thing after another. It was just like there was nothing you couldn't do. Wherever you was putting your... And do you believe in, like, there's a massive hype thing around manifestation and, law of attraction and all that stuff. It's huge, right? I mean, it's been around for forever and it's a massive thing at the moment. It has been for a while. And I believe I've been doing it for quite some time, just whatever I set my mind to, I will achieve it. So that was what struck me as you was taking it to a different level. Because it's like, you was coming across roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And it was just like, you was just smashing through all these roadblocks. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe in manifestation. And I also just believe in the pure will of human beings. When you have that dogged determination to get something done and you have something at stake that's so precious, and in this case it's children, it's like, get out of my damn way. I've got limited time and we're going to discuss this and we've got to discuss it. Our children deserve this, and that's really the driving force behind it. But then also too, I feel Carly around me all the time. And oh gosh, some days it's like walking in magic. Things just unfold. Things just happen. And it's like, I don't know, I truly believe that when you're working to benefit others rather than self, you just step into a whole different kind of
paradigm.
Yeah. Just, you can feel it. It's the strangest thing. Some people may say, feeling God. Some people might say, I don't know, whatever their beliefs are. I'm not particularly religious. I just don't believe in man's interpretation of God. But I do believe that there is certainly something, and I felt it, and a lot of the grieving that I did for Carly, but then also a lot in the work that I do as well. And, when there's an arrest made with Carly's Law, or we get an email saying that a child's been saved through a disclosure that we shared with law enforcement, or, I just get this really strange kind of feeling just comes over me. It's all like electricity. I don't know. There is certainly something else at play, and I've sat in it, seen it with my own eyes, and it's an ordinary thing.
I know from my own personal experience, without sounding like a fucking lunatic. Because some people listening, they're like, "Uh-oh, they're going into that one. They're talking about that one," and it's like,
No.
I'm not really worried about that. I'm not too fussed about that because
No, I mean,
But I know, I know from my own experience. It's very real to me. I told you before I got on this call. I checked in with Carly. I said, "Yo, Carly," I gave her a shout out, and having been in your house, being in Australia and being close to,
you kind of just feel the magic. It's really hard.
close to,
And then you kind of see it. You see it in things sort of happening and unfolding. It's almost, it's really incredible, and I can't explain it. I'm a human being with a limited brain. I don't understand I don't understand the workings of the entire universe and what's around us energetically, and what's going on. I can't make any comment on what that is because I don't know. I can only speculate. So for me, whatever it is helps me. I just feel surrounded in a lot of love, like this kind of like a big old love blanket sometimes. I just feel held a lot of the time, and it's really an amazing feeling, and I need that in this work. It's really hard work. It's really difficult. And often I'm amongst all of this work, I'm missing the hell out of my daughter. She should be here. She should be here, about to celebrate the holidays. She should be here with her brother. She should be experiencing life like a lot of us get the opportunity to do. It sucks. It's unfair. It's awful. But in the situation where our choices were taken away from us, I'm doing the best I can to, survive, to try and make a difference, to try and prevent other kids from going through a similar thing. And I'll do it until the day I drop off. No doubt about that.
I know. I've bared witness to your determination. I've never met anyone like there's no one I'm yet to meet who can top your levels of dedication to a cause.
The power of love.
Indeed. So you're writing a book. Is that going to be the title?
Yep. I don't want to give too much away because
okay, that'll do for now. Just drop that.
I just think that potentially sharing my journey, sharing my experiences could potentially help another person going through something similar, or just hopefully inspire someone to keep on going, and things. Life is hard. Separate to tragedies, in general, life is hard for everyone at various degrees. And I think, we've seen a real rise in loneliness over the last few years.
Do you think that's coming out of tech? What was
Partially responsible.
Yeah, COVID, partly. Yeah. And just the climate we're in, just in general. I've described it before. It's like a cloud of angst. It's like this like a weather a global geo. I don't know how to say it. I'm not a bloody weatherman, but you know what I mean. There's like there's like this universal cloud of angst.
Yeah, and anxiety and worry. I think people in general are like worried,
Mm.
and I mean, but I would just say, don't be frozen in fear. What do they say? It's a quote I've heard. What's on the other side of fear? Opportunity. So,
Ooh.
you can't kind of be frozen in that. You've got to just none of us have any control of how long we're gonna be here and when it's our time. Nobody does. So live your life and, do everything in your power to make an imprint in this world in a positive manner, and, even if it's little gestures, smiling at someone on the street, you know, carrying some bags for an older person, like, just those little things just can change a person's day, it's just
Yeah.
any little acts of kindness along the way, and, don't be kind of try not to become stagnant in life and, live. Yeah, we have a good time, and I think a lot of the time we forget that because no one wants to talk about death, no one wants to, face that. It's the hardest thing we have to deal with as human beings, but,
Yeah.
to deny death is to deny life. If you're worrying about dying all the time, then you're not gonna live, are you?
Absolutely. And it's when you face death like you have,
Mm.
not just in what happened, but, with your own experience of trying to navigate your way out of it, you was, do I live or do I not? And you chose to live, right? And here we are
Chose to
years,
fight. I
right?
chose to I
You
chose to
chose to
fight.
fight. Yeah, you chose to fight. And here we are years later, and look what you've achieved. Look what the hell you've achieved, and you're still doing it. So, honestly, I keep saying it. I'm your biggest fan. It's just, I'm blown away. You're a powerhouse. And I honestly, you inspire me so much, man. Um, so I feel like I want to talk for hours, and I always can with you, but I think we should finish it up soon. So I think we started off, it was all very, some people might find this conversation really like hard to take on, right? Because it's a heavy, heavy topic, what we're talking about. Um, and I think people have got a strong sense of your humanity, of course, and your strength, and your courage to fight, like you say, right? And here we are, here you are, um, a mighty badass, right? Taking on the forces of evil, right? Literally. Um, what is your mission? What are you, what's the next sort of like, I don't know, 2025? What's happening? What are you going to achieve?
Oh, helping to, get some compulsory education into schools in America,
Ooh,
writing some AI information for schools on, deep fakes and things like that. But continuing to participate in the United States involvement in the UN Cybercrime Convention, contributing to national working groups in America, continuing to contribute to national working groups in Australia. We are evolving our Project Connect education program to include not only online safety and healthy relationships, but to prevent tech-based abuse against women and children. So that's what we're working on at the moment. And hopefully advising the Australian government on some curriculum updates. Still continuing to advocate for Carly's Law globally. There's just so much. The list is as long as my arm. It's just
it's longer than your arm.
yeah, supporting the community in relation to the Australian social media ban, advocating for, free mental health care for kids under the age of 18, a whole range of things. So, really, hopefully finishing my book. There's hopefully, there's a lot more that we're gonna be able to achieve this year.
Yeah.
And I'll continue to travel back and forth between the United States and Australia as needed. Um, and then, yeah, just trying to continue to create awareness around this and really shine a spotlight on this crime type and, have some people get behind Carly's legacy as well. We always need support and donations from the community to operate. Um, and just get some real results, continue to get real results that impact the community. I'd say to anyone listening, visit our website, carlyryanfoundation.com. Have a look at our socials, spread the message, spread, Carly's legacy, amongst the people that you love. That's the best way you can help if you want to help, is just share our resources from our website. Just share her story so that her suffering, is not completely in vain and, something good can come from something so awful and horrendous. And I would also say to parents listening, make sure you have conversations with your kids about what they're doing online.
Mm.
Really important to, you know, understand the apps that they're using, because if you understand how they work, the functionality of apps, and you're better equipped to know how to protect them on those apps and how to have conversations with them about those applications and gaming platforms. So, you know, when it's quiet and there's no distraction and you've got time on your own, and sometimes a good place is in the car when you're driving, you know, who are you connecting with online? Is your account on private? Are you I'm just checking in to, just ask you what are some of the, safety things that you're doing on those spaces? Do you know where to report if anything happens? Make sure you can that you can come to me with any issue that happens online and I will not get mad. We will work it out together. And if I don't know what to do, we'll go to someone who does, like the Carly Ryan Foundation. Um, that can basically help us. And so, just have open, real conversations with your kids. And when your kids, if they become, you know, um, defensive or don't want to talk to you about it, remind them what your motivation is. Your motivation is love and care for them. You want them to have a positive experience online. You're their protector, and it's your role to ask those questions. It's what being a parent is.
Absolutely.
And often, excuse me, they will lower their defenses.
That's a really good bit of advice there, because that is a common occurrence, is to push back and go, Mum, shut up, or Dad, leave me alone. Like, just shut up. It's all of that. So I like that, what you said,
It's important. But kids just need to understand it's important to have conversations and have communication.
Absolutely.
Part of what's important, learning things in life, learning things online,
Yeah.
being able to know they can come to their parents with anything rather than
Mm.
suffering alone and trying to figure it out for themselves. And giving them access to support mechanisms as well. So making sure we have a a little wallet card, and on that wallet card is just like access to reporting mechanisms, police, things like that. So a child can have that in their purse or their wallet when they're out with their friends, and they've got access to that for anyone who may need it, if they need it for something, if their friend needs it for something. Now, is that something parents can do? Create one of those for their kids?
And where can people find that?
Just to email the foundation at info@carlyryanfoundation.com, and then just let us know what area you're from in the world so that, we can give an appropriate connection to the things that help
That's amazing.
area. So
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, look, Sonia, it's been amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for, just sharing all of what you've just shared, basically.
of course, I hope that your listeners, can get something from this conversation and can pass on our website information and maybe have some conversations with their own kids and, benefit from it in some way. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I love having real conversations about things that really matter. So important, I think, these days.
Absolutely.
So thank
Absolutely.
you so much for having me on and,
No worries. And I know we'll speak very soon at some point. How do I say goodbye in Australian?
bye.
See ya, mate.
Yeah, mate. Bye. Catch you later.
Catch you later. Oh God, hopefully I just haven't offended lots of Australians by saying that. Oh my God.
Good.
My brother lives in Australia. Oh my God. Okay, I'm keeping that in. I don't edit these. Right, okay.
Right.
Take care. Take
See you
care.
later.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.